I want to welcome everybody to the webinar this evening. This is truly an extraordinary opportunity, and we're thrilled to have almost 100 people here, and I couldn't be more proud. Rotarians view themselves, they use the term people of action, and we certainly are people of action. Our members are frequently inspired by many of the things that we do, and it requires kind of a demonstration of pluck to go and do things like bring polio vaccines to India, or to travel over to Nepal to do physical therapy for people that have broken bones, but there's no physical therapy, or to even just feed our local people as we're going through the pandemic. Our club has raised tens of thousands of dollars to help elderly people who need support. Part of the reason why I'm reaching out to distinguished speakers is to continue to inspire us with speakers who have demonstrated pluck and had some luck and moved their careers along, largely to inspire our thinking to make commitments to help our communities both internationally and locally. I am anybody out there that has interest in talking to me about Rotary Club and membership, that would be great. Anybody out there that would like to put me in touch with people that might be interesting speakers, that would be great as well. Just contact me through Marblehead Rotary Club. I do want to let everybody know that this is being recorded. We plan, when this is done, to put it up on our website and make it available through social media. And I want to thank everybody who submitted questions to us. And I want to also thank Alexander Falk, who is past president, and David Deutsch, who have assisted in organizing this with me, along with giving me the technology base to do it. We're borrowing the software from our district to be able to run this webinar, and I thank the district for that as well. I want to thank our panelists, Will Dowd, who's a Salem resident, who graduated from Lockhaven University in Pennsylvania with a print journalism degree in 2009. Will wrote for his college newspaper, the Eagle Eye, for 4 years, and he has covered the North Shore since 2011, starting at the Marblehead Reporter, and in 2016 is covering Swampscott and Salem as well. And Chris Stevens is an award-winning journalist who has covered community news for a little over 20 years. She spent 15 years at the Lynn Daily Item, where she covered Peabody, Saugus, Revere, and Lynn, with a little Nahant thrown in. She's, I think, you're the editor of the Marblehead and Swampscott Reporters as well, I think. And she wrote a food column, Side Dish, for 14 years, and she's been with the Reporter for over 5 years. We're thrilled to have our community news people with us, and they will be guiding the Q&A process. And I'd like to introduce our speaker, Phil Rucker. He was born in, you want me to give the year, 1984, and attended St. Andrew's School in Savannah, which is actually where my connection to him. They were roommates in high school, and he finished in 2002 with valedictorian in his class, which I was as well. After high school, he proceeded to Yale, where he studied history, graduating in 2006. He's been working with the Washington Post since 2005. And I'll let you talk about your history, but he has recently written a bestseller book called A Very Stable Genius, Donald J. Trump, Testing of America. It's a #1 New York Times bestseller. And he's also won the Pulitzer-Prize for national reporting in 2018 for coverage of Russian interference. I think that was delivered to him at Columbia University in 2018. and the George Polk Award 2018 for coverage of the Russian interference, and the Gerald R. Ford Journalism Prize in 2018, and the Sigma Delta Chi Award for coverage of Russian interference. And when I was doing some research, I found some pictures of Phil when he was a teenager doing figure skating, which I will throw away, and you don't have to cover that at all. But I do have the goods on his high school years, and for that, that's why he's here. So with that, I will pass this off to you, Phil, to give us a little background on how you kind of coursed your career to where you are, and then we'll start up with the questions. So thank you very much for being here. We're honored to have you.
Yeah, Arthur, thank you for having me here. And I have to say, I'm a little, I did not expect you to bring up figure skating in the introduction there, but thank you for that. I trained as a competitive skater as a child out in California, so that's the reference there. And I also want to thank Adam Sissio, who's a classmate of mine in high school from Savannah, Georgia, who lives in Massachusetts and knows you, Arthur, and connected us, and is the reason we're all here tonight. So thanks for taking an hour out of your evenings to chat, and I'm looking forward to it. And I know a lot of you have a lot of questions about the Trump White House, which I cover day to day, and the book that I did with Carol Lenig, my Washington Post colleague. And we'll get to that in a minute. But Arthur, you had asked earlier if I would just take a couple of minutes and explain what it is that I do and how I got to where I am at the Washington Post. And so, I've been a journalist, a reporter ever since college, and came to the Post as an intern. And I started at the lowest level. I covered local community news out in Southern Maryland in a little town called La Plata. That's about 45 minutes outside of Washington, D.C., and was chronicling the county government there and the school system and house fires and shootings and all sorts of news. I was the Post's eyes and ears on Charles County, Maryland. And then from there, covered a succession of beats as I developed more experience, covered the state government in Maryland, Governor Martin O'Malley at the time in Annapolis, and wrote a lot about nonprofits and philanthropy, actually, and chronicled, crisis at the American Red Cross and United Way and some of the other big philanthropic organizations. And then joined the national staff at the Post to cover politics in 2008, and have been a political reporter ever since. So that's about 12 years now, and have covered an array of beats in politics, from the rise of the Tea Party. I covered Congress. I was our lead reporter on the Mitt Romney campaign in 2012, so I spent an awful lot of time that year in Boston and in Wolfboro on Lake Winnipesaukee, where Romney would go in the summertime for his weekends away and his vacation, and obviously all across New Hampshire for the primary there. And so I'm very fond of New England and of your where you all live. And I also covered the Obama White House, and then of course the historic campaign in 2016, both Trump and Hillary Clinton. And when Trump won, I was named the White House bureau chief, and so I've been here in Washington leading our coverage for the last 3.5 years of the Trump White House. We have 7 White House reporters on the team, and we could use 17. I mean, it's a really grueling and demanding assignment, but it's also been incredibly challenging and exhilarating from a journalist perspective, just because of the nature of the stories we're covering, and really what I think is the societal need, that the national urgency to cover this administration and to hold what this president and his team are doing, hold them accountable for the actions that they're taking every day in our government. So I guess I'll leave it at that, because I don't want to bore you anymore with talk about me, because I want to get to your questions, and I know you've got a lot of them.
Okay. We'll pass it off to Chris and Will. So you're on.
Right. Phil, thanks so much for doing this and taking time out of, we know this is going to be like a busy day for you already. So about an hour ago, we all learned that Senator Kamala Harris will be Joe Biden's running mate. Can you just start off with just talking about how this is going to affect the election in 2020?
You know, this is an historic selection, obviously, because Kamala Harris would be not only the first woman vice president if she's elected, but she'd be the first African American Black vice president if elected. She'd also be the first Asian American vice president if elected, because she is also of Asian American heritage. Yeah, and a daughter of immigrants. She's a prosecutor. Many of us know her from the primaries earlier this year when she herself ran for president, but she's been especially skilled in Washington at prosecuting the case against the Trump administration. As reporters, we've covered a lot of these hearings when the Attorney General, Bill Barr, or others will go before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and one of the fiercest questioners has been Senator Harris, and she's really been a contrast to the Trump administration. So in selecting her, I think Biden is not only trying to make history and energize the Democratic base electorally for the campaign, but he's also looking for somebody who can help him prosecute the case against President Trump and help crystallize for the American people why they believe Trump does not deserve a second term. And he's looking for a governing partner. And one of the most telling things about Kamala Harris, she, at the beginning of this process, everyone thought she was the most likely vice presidential pick. And then for the last few months, we've seen a whole bunch of other names rise and fall and rise again and fall again. And there was a lot of speculation about others, but Biden came back to Harris. And we should keep in mind that Harris was very close to his son, Beau Biden. They both served as state attorneys general at the same time, he in Delaware, she in California, and they were close allies in that work and friendly with one another. And so Biden has seen Harris as he has that emotional connection to her.
And also there was that very moving experience whenever Harris spoke to him during the debate stage. Back in last fall, I remember when she talked about being busing or as a child.
Oh yeah.
Some of the policies that he implemented impacted her. So
she attacked Biden in a pretty effective way in that first Democratic primary debate over Biden's history on busing and race relations, and it was a low moment for the Biden campaign, and it ended up being the best moment for the Harris campaign because she didn't really have a second act after that. But it created some friction between Harris and Biden and their camps and their allies and family members, and it took some time to work through that. And it speaks to Biden's maturity, I think, as a candidate, that he's been able to look past that and still select Senator Harris because he sees her as qualified, because he thinks she'll be a good governing partner, because she is the kind of person he wants as vice president, despite the attack that she made on that debate stage.
Since you kind of brought up the idea of debates, well, I'm going to take a question out of order here.
Okay.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about potential presidential debates, hopefully coming up, and the possibility of real-time fact-checking for both sides. How does that work?
Oh, that's a great question. We've not, in 2016, there was some discussion ahead of those debates about whether the moderators would try to fact-check then candidate Trump in real time, or candidate Clinton, were she to say things that were not true, although of course it's Trump who lies more frequently than others in politics. That said, there was a consensus among the moderators that it's not their duty to fact check the candidates in real time, that the candidates are answering the questions as they see fit and providing the answers they want to give, that the opposing candidate can certainly jump in and blow a whistle, but that they would leave the fact checking to the analysis of the debate and to the news organizations that are covering the debate, rather than have the moderator insert himself or herself in that way. I assume that will continue to be the case this fall in the 3 debates that Trump and Biden will have, and in the one debate that Mike Pence and Kamala Harris now will have. But who knows? It's worth pointing out, by the way, that the last two major sit-down television interviews that President Trump has done, both with Chris Wallace of Fox News and with Jonathan Swan of Axios that aired on HBO, they fact-checked the president in real time, and they called him out on things he was saying that were not true, and the president got very uncomfortable and agitated in that environment. But it made for very effective television, and it also, I think, helped viewers sort of know in real time as they're watching the president speak to know what's BS and what's not. So there was a value there.
My guess is he doesn't like to be called out on things. The president, that is.
He does not. He does not.
So just one more question about the vice president pick today. Were you surprised at all? Were you surprised, or like, you know, who did you think were sort of like in the top 5 or top 3, would you say? If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, you know, I was not surprised. I always sort of viewed Harris as the leading contender. In a lot of ways, she's the safest pick. She's been pretty thoroughly vetted because she herself ran for president and for a period there was considered a leading candidate in that primary. And so she got a very close look by news organizations, by rival campaigns. She's well known on the national stage, and she's been in that spotlight before, and she's had to handle some of those difficult questions before. So in that sense, she's a pretty safe pick compared to, say, Congresswoman Karen Bass, who was another finalist for the job, but who has not been in the national political spotlight and has not gone through that sort of rigorous vetting period. You know, a really interesting contender, I thought, was Susan Rice, the former Obama National Security Advisor, former ambassador to the United Nations. She was personally the closest to Joe Biden. They obviously worked together as colleagues for all 8 years of the Obama administration. And I think my reporting shows that Biden considered her to be a very loyal, trustworthy, comfortable partner in governing. He was comfortable with her, but she was totally untested as a political candidate. She's never run for office. She's never had to give a speech to rally supporters. She's never had to face the kind of pressure cooker setting that a vice presidential debate would provide. And so in that sense, she was a little bit riskier of a choice, but I would not have been surprised had Biden gone for her in the end.
Interesting. Circling back to, you were talking about Chris Wallace and the last couple of interviews that Trump has done. You've done a one-on-one interview with Trump, correct? I've done
many, yes.
What is that like? What is it like to have a one-on-one?
It's interesting. He's a very charismatic man, and he wants nothing more than to be liked and to be respected. And so he's solicitous. He'll, like, in these settings, he'll go out of his way to make you feel comfortable, to try to curry favor with you. Keep in mind that the interviews and interactions that I've had with him have not been on camera. I'm not a television reporter. I'm a print journalist. Yeah. And so he acts differently when he's not on camera. You don't see him being warm and solicitous and gregarious when he's sitting down with Chris Wallace, but he is that way when I'm in the Oval Office with him or another newspaper reporter. During his 2016 campaign, I interviewed him once over lunch at his golf club here in Northern Virginia, outside of Washington. It's the club that he goes to oftentimes on the weekends here to play golf. And he gave me a whole tour of the property. He showed me the pro shop. I thought he was going to give me free clothes, but he didn't. And I, of course, never would have taken them because that would violate my journalistic ethics. But when we sat down for lunch, he wanted to make sure I was ordering everything. And one of the most telling details about him is he would order a Diet Coke for lunch, and every 10 minutes or so, when the ice cubes started to melt, he would summon the waiter to bring him a fresh Diet Coke. So he hadn't had very much of the soda, but the ice cubes would melt, and he didn't want the water mixing in with his soda, so he would get a new one.
Okay. It's good to be king.
It's his club. It's his club, though. Exactly. So good to be king.
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
Well, Just to talk about your book for a second, A Very Stable
Yeah.
Genius. I'm curious to know if you could give context around the name of the book, because when I was telling people, like, you know, this is the book, it's you basically taking his own words and sort of, you know, saying him basically saying that he's a very stable genius, and it's might be a little unflattering to him or flattering to him, but can you talk about the context of when he actually said those words? Like, what year did he say that? When did he say, I'm a very stable genius? When was it? Like, can you point to that moment?
Yeah, I can explain all of that. And first of all, let me just be clear. President Trump does not like the title of our book. He does not like the cover of the book. He does not like the book itself. He attacked it. He attacked it vociferously on Twitter, called it a work of fiction, and called my co-author Carol and I stone cold losers. So we are his stone cold losers.
Hey, that's I would say.
I guess that's a badge of honor. I don't know. I'd rather the president not be attacking me, but if he's going to attack me and promote my book, I'll take it, I guess.
There you go.
The title,
good marketing.
It is very good marketing. The title, A Very Stable Genius, that is a phrase that the president has repeatedly used in describing himself. And he first used it in January of 2018. This was about 1 year into the presidency, and there was a national discussion sort of underway, commentary in the media about whether the president is mentally fit, whether he had the acuity and the sort of wherewithal, whether to serve as the president. And Trump defended himself on Twitter in a lengthy explanation for why he thinks he's smart and mentally all there. And then at the end, he said, I'm not only a genius, I'm a very stable genius. And then he repeatedly called himself that, including overseas at international summits. He would, at a press conference at NATO, I was there, he called himself a very stable genius. And so, you know, Carol and I, when we were writing this book, as we were finishing it up, struggling to come up with the title, we decided what better way to capture our book, which is a history of these 3 years, but it's also a character study of Donald Trump, the man, the president, what he's been like, what motivated him in office. What better way than to use his own words and to use his own self-description and basically hold it up as a mirror onto the president and stress test that description against the accounts of more than 200 senior administration officials, advisors to the president, other people, you know, with knowledge and who witnessed a lot of these scenes. That's how many people we interviewed for the book. And we wanted to test whether they considered him a very stable genius. And I have to tell you, you don't have to read very many pages into our book to conclude what we concluded, which is that no, they do not consider him stable, nor do they consider him a genius.
How did the book come about? How did you and Carol?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Carol is a veteran investigative reporter at the Washington Post, and you know, we don't work directly together that often, but we had both been covering different elements of the Trump story for the Post. Carol was one of our lead reporters writing about the Russia investigation, about the president's lawyers, the shenanigans in the White House counsel's office and at the Department of Justice. And so, you know, we were friends and colleagues and covering different aspects of this same story. And we basically got together and thought, you know what, we're living history here. We really ought to write a book about this. We ought to write the history book. And we had a great agent named Elise Cheney who had known Carol for a few years before and was really encouraging us to do this project. She said, there are a lot of Trump books and, you know, not a lot of them are serious, rigorously reported historical accounts that can stand the test of time. And, you know, the two of us were uniquely positioned to be able to tell that story given our expertise and our deep sourcing inside the White House. So we got together, we got permission from our editor, Marty Barron, to take a little bit of a book leave. And we just kind of hit the pause button on the daily reporting and went back to sources. We found a lot of news sources and we said, you know, we lived all these dramas day to day, but go back and tell us what really happened. Like, pull back the curtain a little bit. And boy, did they pull it back. They, we spent hours with people in interviews. We read their diaries. We looked at their calendar entries. We watched personal videos,
Well, people
all to try to, to try to reconstruct what really happened and what really was going on behind the scenes in ways we didn't know in real time.
Why do you think?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
I totally stepped on you, Will. I said, why do you think people were so forthcoming? Why do you think they were? Was it to get that history out there, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. They all have different motivations. Mm-hmm. Some people, of course, are forthcoming because they have internal rivalries they want to promote, or they want to clear their name for history, or what have you. But the most important interviews we found were from people who just felt a public duty, an obligation to tell the truth and to really let people in the country know what's going on. These are folks who believed in the president, who wanted him to succeed, who worked for him because they believed in his agenda and wanted to help him govern and be a successful president. And once they got there and behind the scenes, they were really alarmed and appalled by his conduct, by his character, by his lack of knowledge, by the way he went about making decisions. And they're not comfortable talking about it publicly because of the president's threat of retribution. He is still the sitting president, but they did think it's important for the public to learn these things. And so they trusted me and they trusted Carol, and they told us a lot of these stories.
There's a particular part that I've heard about in the book about them taking President Trump to the tank and talking, like trying to school him on geopolitics and military deployments all throughout the world. And he kind of found that to be like his top generals, Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson at the time. They all took him down into the tank. That's in the White House, or is that in the Pentagon?
Yeah, that's a really memorable scene from the book. That is a room in the Pentagon. It's actually the conference room for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but it happens to be a historic room, a really sacred space in the Pentagon. That's where generals usually get together to hash out war plans and decide matters of war and peace. And the president loved the sort of historical trappings of the setting. And so what happened is Tillerson, the Secretary of State, Mattis, the Defense Secretary, and Gary Cohn, who was the top economic advisor at the White House at the time, they had grown really concerned that the president didn't understand the world. He didn't understand our alliances. He didn't understand why we had military bases where we had them. He just needed to be schooled on geopolitics. And so they brought him to the tank to go through a PowerPoint presentation explaining all of this to him. And Trump had no patience for that Schoolhouse Rocks vibe. And he started snapping at the generals. And he said the war in Afghanistan was a loser war. That's the phrase the president gave. He said that to the generals, you're a bunch of dopes and babies. And then he said something that really scarred them. He said, I would never go to war with you people. And it was a chilling moment in that room. And nobody in uniform stood up to confront him. They didn't challenge him. Vice President Pence was there, and he didn't challenge Trump either, even though Pence's own son had served in the war in Afghanistan. But Rex Tillerson, a civilian who was the Secretary of State, did stand up and confront the president and say, you can't talk about our troops that way. And, our troops are not in this to make a buck. They're not in this for a war for profit. They're there to protect the peace and the order. And anyhow, the meeting abruptly ended soon thereafter. And after the president left, Tillerson said to a few other people in the room that the president was an effing moron. That was his quote. And it really marked the beginning of the end of their relationship.
And that was the start. Yeah, exactly. I remember whenever that happened. Tillerson, he was like out after that had happened. And this was, just to give some context, this was like 6 months into, I believe, Trump being in the White House, correct? That's right.
Yeah, I want to say it was in July of 2017.
Yeah. And how did you get people on the record? I mean, you're in the tank, which is supposed to be a place where it's not supposed to be bugged at all or anything like that. So, there were, you can count, or you would know the names of the people who were actually in the room during that time. So I kind of find it interesting that you and Carol were able to actually get people on the record in something that like that. So I'm wondering how you did that.
Yeah. Well, it took a lot of work. We certainly knew that meeting took place because it was on the president's schedule. He traveled in his motorcade to go to the Pentagon, and in the months that followed, there were little bits of reporting that came out about that scene. But Carol and I just knew that there was a richer story to tell of what happened. We just had sort of a gut feeling that there was more than we knew. And we just deliberately and methodically went after, seeking interviews with people who we knew were in the room. And we were able to talk to enough of them, and enough of them, filled in the dialogue. And a lot of them took notes in that meeting or immediately afterwards to try to remember what was said. And they shared those notes with us. And that's how we were able to reconstruct the scene.
Amazing.
Thank you.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit and go get into sort of just the art of being a newspaper reporter. Can you tell us a little bit about actually the role of editor-in-chief, but also your role as bureau chief in making sure that the Washington Post publishes fact versus a reporter's biased opinion? How tough is it to keep that out of there?
That's a great question. So, as the White House bureau chief, I'm not actually an editor. I'm a reporter, and I lead our team of reporters.
Okay.
And I help advise on coverage, but I'm not in management. I don't make editorial decisions. That said, I can speak to our philosophy at the Post, which I'm sure is the same as at your newspapers as well, and in much of the mainstream media, which is, we're journalists. We're covering a story objectively, and we want to be fair, and we want to give a fair hearing to everyone in a story. And that doesn't mean that we don't have our own values or our own personal beliefs about an issue or even about an individual. Although I will say for myself, I'm not a particularly partisan political person. I don't root for one side or the other. I certainly have values and beliefs and form my own judgments, but I'm not, I find that people who are really motivated by partisan political outcomes end up not making it in journalism because it's too difficult to stay objective in these settings. So anyhow, that's a side note about myself. But, in covering the Trump administration, what we find most important is to just be fair to them. I would say that our coverage is among, if not the most aggressive and adversarial of any major newspaper in the country, and yet we still cover him fairly. And the way we do it is we, find out facts, and we share those facts with our readers, and we check those facts, and we corroborate those facts. And, if we're going to have a story that mentions Mark Meadows, the chief of staff at the White House, it may be a crap burger story that Meadows does not want in the paper, but we still reach out to him and to his staff and seek their comment and seek their input and try to understand their explanation for why he did what he did, or why he believes what he believes, or why he said what he said. And so that's kind of basic journalism 101. But I think, it's really important. And, we don't write in our stories opinions. They're not polemics. They're stories with facts and quotes, and they might be very damaging to the president from a political perspective, but it's not an opinion. It's a set of facts.
But you must get the same complaints that we get, even on a in our small town coverage, where people will say, well, you said in your story, and you always have to stop and tell someone and go, I didn't say it. So,
exactly.
This person said it. That's why attribution.
But it's, yeah.
So
you're exactly right. Although it's tricky, right? Because we make, when you're writing a story, or you're editing a story, or you're the copy editor and making a headline, writing a headline for a story, you're making judgments all the time about how you present information to your readers. And so it's just always important for us to be fair in making those judgments. And there's one thing that our executive editor, Marty Barron, said that sticks with me. And Marty, if you guys don't know, used to be the executive editor of the Boston Globe, and was made Hollywood famous in Spotlight. He was the editor who oversaw the Catholic Church investigation in the Globe. Anyhow, Marty says about the Trump coverage that we're not at war with the administration, we're at work. And we should think of this as work. And, you know, we're not trying to take anybody down. We're not trying to generate any particular outcome. We're just trying to hold the people in power accountable to the public. And we're trying to shine light and get answers.
Sure. While you talk about Marty Baron, I was listening to a Fresh Air interview with Dave Davies that you did with Carol a couple months back.
Oh yeah, Dave was wonderful.
I think it was actually, it didn't air when it was supposed to because the impeachment trials were going on. But speaking, you had mentioned,
but they aired it, I think, a couple months later.
That's right. And they also aired it a couple weeks ago too. And it's a great interview. I suggest everyone check it out on NPR. Yeah. Is that Marty Baron basically doesn't like to use the word or to attribute the word lying to Trump unless you absolutely have to. Can you kind of talk about the other type of words that you kind of want to use, or just what you're thinking behind that, or in what he said?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because this is actually an issue that a lot of our readers, especially of the liberal persuasion, ask us all the time, you know, why don't you call the president a liar? Why don't you say he's lying? And here's why. You know, to call something a lie means that somebody is not only saying something that's false, but that they're deliberately doing so, that there's a motive at play. And we don't always know Trump's motive. We can't get inside his head. It's not always clear whether he's deliberately misleading the public for a certain outcome, in which case it would be a lie, or whether he's ill-informed or confused or repeating something wrong, or what have you. As we know, he's a fairly undisciplined public speaker, and he says things that are wrong all the time. In fact, the Washington Post has compiled more than 20,000 falsehoods, misstatements, and yes, lies. But we're very careful about using that label of calling something a lie. And I'll give you an example of what is a lie. When the president, and this was back when he was a candidate and before then a private citizen, when he for a few years claimed that Barack Obama was not born in the United States, he was leading that birther crusade and claiming the birth certificate was a fake. That was a lie. Donald Trump knew that was not true. It had been proven to be untrue, the theory that is, by President Obama, and Trump repeated it nonetheless as a way to discredit and diminish President Obama. So that was a lie, and we called it a lie. But some of these things that the president says day to day that are not true or that are false, we don't necessarily know what his motive is. So that's why we hesitate to call it a lie.
Fair enough.
You want to take the next one, Chris?
Sure. So along with being bureau chief and writing your book and all that thing, you won a Pulitzer-Prize.
Thanks for reminding me.
Where is it? What was that like? I mean, when you got the news, that must have been, a little bit of mind blowing. And how does it color what you do now? Do you feel an added pressure to sort of top yourself?
It's a great question. I always aspired to, maybe someday win a Pulitzer-Prize, and every journalist does. Yeah. I didn't quite anticipate that it would happen in this way, but we won in 2018 for national reporting. We actually shared it with the New York Times for our coverage of Russia's interference in the election, and what those stories were all about. The Flynn saga and that whole first year, 2017, uncovering so much, but serious stuff. I mean, uncovering piece after piece about how Russia was interfering in our democracy and what the Trump campaign was doing about it. And we were honored to receive the prize. We shared it, of course. There were about 10 or 11 reporters at the Post who were part of a team that did all of that coverage, and so I was lucky enough to be a part of that great team. And we all went to New York on a really nice spring day back before the pandemic, when we could actually be in the same room together. And the Pulitzers have a great kind of ceremony. It's a luncheon in the Low Library at Columbia, which is a really grand and spectacular place. And you know, a lot of our journalistic heroes were there, and great journalists won. Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey and Ronan Farrow won the Public Service Award that year for their coverage of Harvey Weinstein and sparking the Me Too movement. And that was really cool. Also cool, Kendrick Lamar won a Pulitzer-Prize that same year. So he was the big celebrity at the event. Anyhow, it was neat to win, but it doesn't really change how I think about my job. The job's the same, the work is the same. And I hope someday to maybe win another.
Did Hamilton win that year too? Or was that the year before? Did Hamilton win before, or Lin Miranda?
I think he won the year before, or maybe a couple years before that. I don't think he won our year. I would have remembered that had that been my year. I'm a big fan of Hamilton. Yeah.
Me too. So let's just get into some more questions here, political questions. This one comes from a reader who was pre-submitted before today, but we also have some ones that people are submitting too, and we'll get to those hopefully here.
Oh, great.
And the question is, do you agree with the growing speculation that President Trump would rather not run for re-election than risk losing badly? You want me to say that again?
No, I heard it. It's an interesting theory. I've heard it, of course, bandied about in Washington. I have to say, first of all, it's a little late for him to get out of the race. He definitely doesn't want to lose or be a loser, but I think he also, I don't know. I don't see that happening. I think he's gonna pull out every stop he can and fight to the end to try to win this race. And he may well play dirty at the end if the way he campaigned in 2016 is any indication. So, you know, we'll see. I fully expect him to be the Republican nominee on Election Day.
So sort of following that up, just say he does lose. What are the chances are, this is also a reader submitted, what do you think the chances are that Trump will attempt to delegitimize, I can't even say the word, delegitimize the election and a peaceful change of leadership?
Fairly high. I don't.
Hard to get him out of the building.
Well, I don't know about that. And if it really came down to it, to where he physically wouldn't leave the White House, that would be an extraordinary moment in American democracy. And it would be a sad moment too. And I don't know that we want to envision that. But I certainly think Trump, if the results come in and he loses to Joe Biden, is going to try to delegitimize the results. We already see him laying the groundwork to do so, talking for the last several weeks about mail-in voting, claiming widespread fraud with mail-in voting when there's not really any evidence to support that, suggesting that Democrats are going to try to cheat through mail-in voting. Again, no evidence to support that. But this all seems to be an effort by Trump to make his supporters believe that the election results can somehow not be trusted, so that if Biden is declared the winner, Trump will be able to protest it. He could perhaps file lawsuits too. We heard a week or two ago the president float the idea of endless litigation after the election. And this, of course, is from a president who in his previous life was known for being rather litigious and filed a lot of lawsuits. So I would not be surprised to see, if Biden ends up winning, to see this drag on for many months and be very ugly and divisive in the country.
Sort of in that same vein, how do you see, if Trump does lose and he's divisive, how do you think his supporters will react? Do you think will it be spates of violence, or,
I don't know. I would hope there wouldn't be any violence, but I do think that a lot of his supporters, not all, but a lot of his supporters are going to believe what he says and are going to be looking to him for guidance and direction. And if he claims the election is rigged and claims that it was stolen by the Democrats, there is a subset of this country that is going to believe that. And what they do with that belief, I don't know, and I can't foresee, and I sure hope it wouldn't be violent. But Trump has a very powerful megaphone, and it would be rather destructive to the country and to our democracy for him to challenge what is otherwise a fair outcome in an election.
And then just to go back to the 2020 election, without, with the COVID situation going on right now, we're not going to have a Democratic or a Republican I don't know. I'm not really sure about the Republican convention yet, but I know Democrats are taking the more sort of careful, public safety side, but as far as these conventions aren't going to be the way that they were in the past, how do you see the parties getting their messages out? What other means do you think that they'll be able to do it?
So they actually start very soon, and you're correct about the Democrats, but the Republicans also are going to be doing a virtual convention. There was an initial plan by the president to move the convention to Jacksonville, Florida, where he thought he could be able to put on a mass gathering despite coronavirus, but that of course was not to be, so they pulled the plug on that. So the plan now is next week, Monday through Thursday, the Democrats are going to do their virtual convention, and then the following week, the Republicans will do theirs. And what we anticipate is a couple of hours every night of primetime programming that will probably air certainly on the cable news networks, but perhaps on the main broadcast networks as well. But it'll be the same sort of programming that we're used to seeing at a political convention. And what I mean by that is a series of speeches with very carefully tailored messages to try to frame the election choice and to promote the candidate. But what's going to be missing is the energy and the electricity we're used to having at a convention. They're not going to be speaking in an arena with 20,000 supporters and confetti and balloons and music and lights and all that. You're going to see more of like a Zoom effect. I do know from just the recent reporting that the Democrats, the Biden campaign, are planning some surprises. They're planning to have some of these speeches be in interesting locations. There might be some celebrities that get involved. So they're going to look for ways to make the programming a little bit more exciting. But it is not going to be the same kind of live human event that we're used to experiencing every 4 years.
And just real quick, I think I saw the Washington Post put a story up a couple of days ago that President Trump wants to give a speech at Gettysburg. Is that correct? He's toying with the idea of giving a speech at Gettysburg?
That is correct. This would be his formal, his nomination speech at the Republican convention, which he ordinarily would give on the final night of the convention at the convention arena. He instead has proposed delivering it either from the White House or from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the Civil War battlefield. And, he's leaning towards the White House, according to our reporting. That would be unprecedented. There, of course, has been a long tradition in this country of presidents not using the White House for physically, the grounds of the White House for explicit political purposes. But the president delivering his convention speech is obviously an explicit political purpose. He would be violating that norm, but it seems to be legally permissible since he's the president, and therefore the Federal Hatch Act does not apply to him, so he doesn't face the same restrictions about using federal property that other aides do.
That would be even more so for a place like Gettysburg, which is so sacred. It's just like so sacred ground. Just to see someone use it as political purposes just is mind blowing. Yeah.
It is, and the White House, when they talked about Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary, the other day was asked about this, and she said that Gettysburg, talked about Gettysburg and said that the president would want to talk about how he's united the country and brought everybody together, and that's the theme he would try to evoke in connection to Gettysburg. But of course, many Americans would not agree that he has united the country or brought the country together, and there's really no indication that the president's nomination speech at the convention will be one of unity. In fact, I assume it will be one of division to try to demonize Joe Biden, which has been his main campaign tactic so far.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Since we're getting down to the end, I was just trying to sort of scan the questions to see. Actually, somebody just posted a question that I want to.
I'll look at the questions too here.
Have you read Mary Trump's book?
You know what? I have not read it cover to cover. I haven't had time yet, but I have certainly read the coverage of it and the excerpts of it, and I've watched a few of Mary Trump's interviews, including her hour-long interview with Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, which I thought was fascinating. And I find Mary Trump, to be a really compelling and clearly very smart woman, but her story and her account of life in the Trump family, as well as, of course, the portrait she paints of her uncle, the president, is really something else. I mean, it's an extraordinary account. It
is an extraordinary account. And it's interesting because it's her memory, and everybody, you kind of know that objective. So, but yeah, okay. I was just curious if you had read the book.
I will read it at some point. I just haven't yet.
I don't know the whole thing, but yeah, like you, I've watched all the coverage and everything, and it is a fascinating story. Quickly, what has been so you've had a lot of really sort of high points in your career. What has been one of your most inspiring moments in your career as a news reporter?
Oh boy, I don't know that there's an inspiring moment.
But
I cover politics for the last 12 years. There's not a lot of inspiration in politics.
What has been maybe one of the most surprising things?
You're really putting me on the spot here.
I know I'm totally putting you on the spot. I'm sorry. Will, jump in with a question quick.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say that there was one person who had submitted a question wanting to know what the dynamics between the press secretary is and the sort of the press corps. And what it's like. The one person said, do they actually believe what they are saying whenever they're addressing the press corps?
No. No, I've covered the Trump White House long enough to not really believe necessarily what the press secretary is saying, and that goes back to day one of the administration when Sean Spicer came out and gave his now infamous briefing about the inauguration crowd size, the biggest in history, on and on and on, and from there it was just one lie after another from that podium. And that's no different now under Kayleigh McEnany, who I think views this job very much as a performance, she's sort of a political pundit, and she's out there to perform for the president and to advocate on his behalf and to try to spin what the administration is doing to the greatest political effect for the president. I will say that, however, that some of these Trump officials who can be misleading in their public on-camera performances are actually can be quite reasonable and professional, and in my experience, fairly honest behind the scenes. And I'll give a little credit to Sarah Huckabee Sanders here, who, a lot of people who don't know her really came to demonize her for her briefing performances because she would say things that are not true to the public, and there's no excuse for that, and I'm not here to defend that. But I will say one thing a lot of people don't know is that behind the scenes, when I and my colleagues would interact with her one-on-one for stories, which is part of the relationship between a reporter and a press secretary, you have to go to a press secretary to get details confirmed or to get information for your stories. I found her to almost always be the utmost professional and tried to be honest with us. And I felt like, we would sort of get a fair shake when the cameras weren't on and when her boss wasn't watching. So, that's not exactly a defense of her character, but it's a little like, there's a little nuance here. And I don't think everybody watching it from home can see that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And then also there are a lot of people who have thanked you for actually speaking with us today because of, everyone knows that there's news breaking right now, and the fact that you would take time out of your day to talk to us is, especially like the fact that the vice president, nominee, the President Biden has, or not President Biden, but Biden has just, chosen his VP and that you'd be here with us.
Well, I did make a commitment. I did make a commitment to Arthur to do this at 6 o'clock on Tuesday. So I was not at 5 o'clock on Tuesday going to pull the plug and leave you guys hanging. I'm too good of a person to do that.
That's a lot about your character.
I was nervous about it, but I couldn't. I know a little about your character, and I knew you.
I try to keep my word if I can. So
yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, the figure skating pictures would have come out.
Yeah, that's the last thing I want. So.
We have time for probably one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Let's see here. Is there any that jump out to you, Chris? Let's see here.
There was one. I'm sorry.
I would like, there have been a number of legal victories for pursuing like McCann and others in the Cyrus Vance's office. Do you see that being tied up forever, or do you think they'll make progress on any of those investigations?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question. The investigations into what?
Well, like Cyrus Vance is trying to get his tax returns for investigations. Yes. And there was a decision kind of that came down regarding McCann having to testify. And, where do you think those things lie now?
Well, they're ongoing, and I don't think the election calendar is necessarily going to, pause those investigations or make them go away. And to be honest with you, my assumption, and I could be proven wrong here, but my assumption based on my reporting and what some of these officials have said publicly is that even if President Trump were to lose and leave office in January, that some of these investigations would still continue because in New York, for example, they're investigating alleged criminal conduct by the Trump Organization, his business. I mean, it doesn't matter whether he's president or not. Yeah. Like if that conduct is alleged, it's going to be investigated. And so I think the Attorney General and other investigative forces are probably going to continue apace. And I would also assume that there may be an effort by Democrats in Congress to, even after the Trump administration's over, if he were to lose, to investigate misconduct there as well.
Do you think that someone I was having a conversation with someone today and said, do you think that that Biden should pull? I mean, they were in the same party, but what Gerald Ford did for Nixon, should Biden pardon Trump after the election if he is charged with, if he is convicted of a crime, just to basically make, just to neutralize things, because that could be very polarizing and divisive for the country.
It could be. That's a great question. It's not my position to advocate one way or another, and I frankly am not I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert in constitutional law or any of these matters. I will say that if Biden pardons him, that would be divisive in its own way, because I think there are a lot of people on the left who would feel like Trump has committed crimes, plural, a series of crimes, and should be held accountable for that, and would not want to see him pardoned. On the other hand, investigating him without a pardon would be divisive for the other side. So it's a very fraught question, and I'm sure that it's one that Biden's not going to want to have to grapple with, unless he has to, unless we get to that point. But and who knows what the political environment will be like then. But it's a good question.
Maybe he'll just pardon him for some things and not for others.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there are other investigations too. The hush money payments is ongoing with Michael Cohen. So.
You need a Venn diagram for this stuff.
You do.
Well, with that, it's 7 o'clock, 7:01 actually. We've gone 1 minute over here, and I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight into all of this. It's very special for you to appear with us this week in helping Rotary Club grow and be successful and attract younger younger members, which is part of the reason why I'm doing this. And I want to encourage everyone to go out and get the book and read it. It's a easy read. It's a quick read. It's big, but it's not hard to read at all. And with that, I want to thank you and wish you all well in the next few months coming up to November.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you guys very much. Thanks for the great questions, and it was a good way to spend an hour. So glad to be with you.
Thank you, Phil, so much.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed this.
Take care.
Coverage of the election.
Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.